If you don't give your children freedom to make mistakes, freedom to be successful, they're not going to develop into the people that they could be. They have to discover that they can do things well without you shadowing them, and let them have that boost of adrenaline and that mountaintop experience where they go, Mom, I can do it. Because when a kid figures out they can do it, they're willing to do it again.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So, Dr. Kathy, today on the Celebrate Kids podcast, in this daily segment, Facing the Dark, I want to look at a report that I found from the CDC. It actually dates back to 2023. They found that some adolescent risk-taking behaviors, things like drinking, sex, driving, they've actually decreased compared to previous decades. There may be some good news here inside of that, but I want to know a little bit. Do these trends tell us something that's actually a little bit more concerning? I mean, without opportunities to take risks, it really becomes hard to learn new things, to mature and grow and gradually kind of take on a sense of independence. But there are many teens today who appear to be trending in the opposite direction towards heightened anxiety and decreasing desires to take the kinds of everyday risks that really do support human development and that we've seen support human development naturally for many of us. I want to be careful to note that I'm not really advocating for kids to go and do these things, right? I don't want them to get involved in alcohol or drugs or to go into other risky behaviors relationally. But I want to know, I think that not taking other risks might lead to different things later in life. Is there a benefit to guiding our kids to take risks? What are your thoughts here, Dr. Kathy?
Yeah, I'm glad we're talking about it. First of all, there's a risk of our kids taking appropriate risks. I mean, there is a benefit of our kids taking appropriate risks. I love the way you worded that because we can guide them in how to do that. I wrote my book about resilient kids partly because parents were overprotecting our children. In fact, many parents still overprotect our children, which causes them to be fragile, which causes them to be very weak when we think about experiencing new things. So first of all, thank you for clarifying. We're not advocating for, dangerous risk. We're advocating for sensibility here, right? Where we would not push in a dangerous way, but really prod and encourage our children to take risks. And now that might be trying out for a soccer team. And what if you don't make it? And then your peer group finds out, or you tried out and didn't make it. In my case, I remember just hearing you talk about this. So I'm a former musician. As some of our listeners know, I was very much into orchestra and band and went to the university I went to march in the band and stayed involved in music there all the way through graduate school. And I remember as a junior high and high school student and even college, trying out for first chair. I was often second chair viola. Viola was my main instrument. And I'm still Facebook friends and have seen in person the first chair. She actually went to a university and majored in music. She's now a composer, an orchestra director, a music teacher. She's fabulous. Praise God, we're still friends. And I remember, the night before choosing to compete with Tracy, the practice that went on in my home, and then the risk, what if I don't make it? But it was good for me. It was good for my heart to persevere. It was good for my heart to know that I may be capable of this. And then Wayne, what happens when we don't make it, right? When we take a risk to, volunteer to babysit for our neighbors' kids and they don't choose us? What if we, volunteer with the youth pastor to be on a worship team and we're not chosen? Well, we learn empathy, I would hope. We learn compassion. We learn that we're not going to give up. We learn who we are. We learn about our skill set. Are we really as good as we think we are? So maybe that's where humility comes in as well. I think it's extremely important that healthy risks are a part of our lives.
Dr. Kathy, within that, I like the examples that you gave there, but maybe there's some, standard risks that you would expect parents to encourage their kids to take, right? What would be some of those things? Maybe we're parenting right now and we haven't really gotten into appropriate risks, because I think a lot of times as parents, we look out at the world and we're like, the world is dangerous anyway. I don't need to come up with danger for them. And so I think we can almost like really work to protect our kids rather than to maybe open up opportunities for our kids to have a longer leash and to experience that. Maybe I should ask that a little bit kind of with this question. Do our kids need a longer leash? And what would be the longer leash that we would let them walk into or kind of encourage them to pursue?
It so depends, doesn't it? Nobody likes this answer, but it does depend upon your child. It depends on if there are unique needs that your child has. Have there been unique experiences that would legitimately cause a child to be skittish around strangers? We've got to know our children. We talk about this a lot. Know your kids. In fact, if you're raising more than one, please remember your two or three are not identical. And a child might be able to handle a risk, and a sibling might not be able to handle that same risk. It starts with maybe, staying at home for 15 minutes when you run to the neighbor with an apple pie because your neighbor just had surgery, and you let your kids stay home for 10 or 15 minutes and they know that you're right next door. And then maybe like back in my day, it would have been walking to the grocery store. I lived a block and a half from a grocery store, and I know that our mom and dad thought hard about whether Dave and I were able to ride our bike or to walk up there by ourselves with money in our pocket and take care of what was on the list, et cetera. So, and again, today's days are different. Some of you who are listening live in communities where that would not be a good idea. And Wayne and I would want you to be really sensible about that, obviously. So, yeah, longer leash, absolutely, from the standpoint that if you don't give your children freedom to make mistakes, freedom to be successful, they're not going to develop into the people that they could be. They have to discover that they can do things well without you shadowing them, and let them have that boost of adrenaline and that mountaintop experience where they go, Mom, I can do it. Because when a kid figures out they can do it, they're willing to do it again. If they don't think they can do it, they're not going to volunteer to do it. So there's success there. And then there's also, let's be honest, there's also the fall down in the valley experience where, they tried something, whether it was riding a bike without training wheels, or walking to the grocery store, staying home alone, or calling a friend to ask if they'd like to go to a movie and then being discouraged when the answer is no. Giving them appropriate risk and then helping them process the emotion of that, being available to them, is going to be so important.
Dr. Kathy, with that, I remember having this conversation with my kids a couple years ago where I just kind of sat them down and I took a risky step as a parent where I just said, you're going to disappoint me, and so you have to be
Uh,
okay with that. And I have to be okay with that. And I want you to try to do things that you want to do, that you feel like you should do, that you should kind of take a risk at. It was really risky for me as a parent to kind of get over that. And I wonder even, I could imagine somebody that's in a community where they say, I want you to walk to the library by yourself. Like, I'll be honest, we live probably 6 blocks from our local library. We let our kids walk down there. It isn't always great for me, right? I mean, I don't feel awesome about it all the time because I know people in our community and I know people that, might want to talk to my kids in the library. And I don't like that. And there's a point where I need to get to being okay. So there are some times where I jump in the car and drive down there, or they have Apple AirTags on them, and I just have them clip them to their belt loop or something. Like there's just things that I've found that I have to kind of do to get to that place. I think that as we parent, our kids will kind of emulate the things that we do. And so I was a big risk taker when I was growing up. And now there can be a natural tendency for me not to want my kids to take risks because I've learned my lesson, but my kids haven't learned it yet. And so I feel like I could kind of parent them to not do it because we're already kind of at that place. I'm at that place, but I don't open things up for them. How do we as parents build better muscles that allow us to maybe let our kids take a risk and maybe let our kids go and fail? Maybe let our kids ride their bike down the street and skin their knee. Like it's really hard to watch our kids struggle and be in pain. But I think a lot of it also, their resilience actually depends on our attitude. Did we look at them and say, oh, I wish I never would have let you do that because, I knew you were going to fail and I shouldn't have let you do that? Or do we say, hey, it's okay to fail, or it's okay to have that skin knee? How do we as parents get to that point? And does our attitude with it change things?
Oh, your attitudes are so important. Absolutely. I think part of it is understanding the role of the parent is to raise up children who become healthy adults, right? Your role as a parent is to contribute to their upbringing, to create and offer and allow for experiences that mature them. And if we think back on our lives, we were matured when we struggled and didn't make it. I would also push back. You love to say, Kathy, I'm going to push back on you. I'll push back on you a little bit and say that, and you know this, I don't like the word failure. A kid who skins his knee, a kid who forgets a show and tell object for school, a kid who doesn't make a team hasn't failed. They tried and they matured. They tried and they didn't make it. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe it was a bad attitude. Maybe they're just not as talented as somebody else in the school that was trying out for the same role in a drama. But again, I think for parents to even understand that, failure might be a word from your past, but I don't think it's a word that we should use necessarily going forward. I think allowing our kids to have challenging experiences that could go either way, it says that we trust you. And you and I know, Wayne, like security is most important, right? Security is defined by the question, who can I trust? When children know in the knowing of their knowing that their mom and dad trust them to come forth as gold, either because they were successful or they successfully handled a negative experience, it changes everything. That's what allows our kids to grow and to trust us in return and to develop a more well-rounded identity, et cetera, et cetera. I would very much consider in this discussion the role of long-term effects. If my child is going to do something that could have long-term negative effects, I would then step back. Oh, hey, my kid is already fragile about music, is maybe not, very confident. I'm not sure this is the week he should challenge for first chair trumpet. Let's wait a little bit because he's already a little bit discouraged by what happened last Sunday at church. So we consider the situation, we consider the kid, we consider our goals as we parent them, and we help them then figure out, when's the right risk, what's the right risk, et cetera. So I think long-term effects, will it have a negative effect on their belonging? Their relationships, will they lack confidence to approach another boy? Here's your daughter and she's maybe thinking she'd like to do something with a boy and you think that's okay. And the first time she asks, it doesn't go well. How long are you going to wait for her to ask again? These are decisions that we have to make as parents who have been there, done that, and know. So long-term effects, we're more cautious. Short-term gains, then we look in a positive light on all of that. Hope that makes sense.
As Dr. Kathy and I were talking today, it reminded me of a passage that comes out of Matthew chapter 25, and I'll begin reading at verse 24. Then the man who had received 1 bag of gold came and said, Master, I knew that you were a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown, and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid and went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. This is a parable in a sequence of parables that Jesus tells that's recorded by Matthew. In this parable, the servants are entrusted with a number of resources and are expected to act with those resources to grow them. One servant, though, avoids risk entirely. He chooses safety over responsibility. The servant who avoids this risk isn't praised for being cautious. He's actually rebuked for fear. Fear-based avoidance is not neutrality. It's actually seen inside of Scripture in many ways as disobedience. Capacity grows only when responsibility is exercised. And this connects directly to what we've been talking about today, that those who take fewer risks actually have more anxiety. When kids aren't trusted with manageable things, especially manageable risks, they really do internalize this message that they can't handle that thing and eventually grow to believe that they can't handle life. When we remove every risk, we might be unintentionally teaching our kids fear. Letting them try and fail and recover and then try again and encouraging them in each step of the process does build confidence and competence and ultimately resilience. And that builds an internal belief that tells them that they can figure this thing out that they're facing. And I think teaching our kids that and guiding them in that way can be a bright light for the dark times that they're going to inevitably face in the future. I want to thank you for listening to the Celebrate Kids podcast, this daily segment, Facing the Dark. On behalf of Dr. Kathy Koch, my name is Wayne Stender. We're so glad you joined us today, and we're looking forward to seeing you here again tomorrow.